This session is going to be all about Genesys, and we have both Leslie and Brittany from Genesys here. Maybe you just introduce yourselves before we continue.
Sure. And first of all, thank you for having us, Cal. This is a pleasure to be able to do this and share this. I'm Leslie Patterson. I'm the Vice President of Global Advocacy and Customer Engagement at Genesys. Been here just over 2 years now at Genesys with a history of doing reference programs and advocacy work at Oracle, Computer Associates, a few other places too. So,
yeah. And I'm a customer engagement director on Leslie's team. I came over, I actually just celebrated my 2-year anniversary with Genesys. And I also came over from Oracle, so I've got a deep background in tech.
Great. Okay, so let me share my screen, at least till we start officially, and then well, will be yours. So we're going to talk today about a strategic approach to customer marketing, customer advocacy, and how basically the Genesys frameworks works very different. I was very surprised and amazed at how they build this with the sales teams, with collaborating with marketing, of course, customer success, and how kind of they, in many ways, I don't like the word own, but in many ways own some of the communications and engagement with customers. Also why their titles have the word engagement in them, not a classic title in customer marketing and advocacy. So, I mean, these are interesting questions we'll tap onto. Before we start, so just quickly about like Advocay and these activities that we're doing while more people join us. So, first of all, we run these webinars. We're recording the webinars. There's a webinar library. We had one about planning last month. We'll have next month, one about referrals. And we also have a job board. There's also a Slack group. We posted that on the comments on the chat here that you can sign up for if you're not there yet. And again, the idea is basically to help the community of customer marketing professionals and leaders, customer advocacy leaders, engagement leaders, all and practitioners, of course, collaborate, learn from each other's best practices, and kind of everybody grow the success in the industry together. So we're always happy to help. We're always happy to support. If you see jobs on the job board that you're interested in, we might be able to connect you to them. I don't know if Genesys has any open jobs they want to talk about, but I mean, that's kind of just about that. A bit of the trends we see in the market before we move the mic on. So first of all, I just mentioned jobs. I just took this literally today, like 162 jobs, specifically with the title customer marketing in US. Again, this is just from today. I didn't search engagement. I didn't search advocacy. I didn't search references. If I add all those, I'm pretty sure we're going to get 300, 400. So, I mean, there's hundreds of jobs around our domain, which is great news. And that's, again, just from today, January. We also see, of course, more focus on, you know, from analysts. I actually have a call with Forrester this week. It is the customer marketers year. And I think it's very interesting to see the trends in the market from a market where basically the product, the offering was the leader in the decision, to a market where, and I think more so post-pandemic, the customer reference and their voice, their influence leads the decision. I mean, it's great that we have data backing that 5 years back and seeing how that's important. And we see then CMOs, CEOs, whatever, sales leaders, all then pushing customer-facing teams also to be involved in more revenue-oriented activities such as upsell and expansion. Also to try and tie the ROI. And I think Leslie and Brittany have amazingly done that, and they're going to share how they do that and the results that they've seen, which is great. More the life cycle and the journey of the customer. And like we talked about, the growth in the market and the coverage. So I think great trends happening, entering 2021, actually. Happy New Year. This is our first webinar this year. So, I mean, it's a great trend for this market. As far as we look at customer marketing, we think it's really like, if you will, a lot of pillars under one roof. So some teams, if you're a small team of 1 or 2 or 3, you might be only focused on subsets like advocacy, reviews, I don't know, references, great. The broader the team, you're probably, and again, the team here at Genesys are going to talk about their great team, but you might touch more facets, maybe onboarding, maybe somehow connect with the community, advisory boards, of course. I mean, life cycle marketing, upsell. I mean, you can't do everything at once when you're starting the advocacy programs and customer marketing and engagement programs. But as you grow your team, as you grow your maturity, you definitely should be thinking of, you know, a wider prism of activities. For us, the way we look at it is really engaging customers both in all their touch points, but also connecting all that data to their journey and to CRM, just so you know how we look at it. And then we like to visualize that for marketers so they could understand the ROI. And I think with that, the only thing I would say that since we're planning 2021, I know that many companies have sorted their budget and done their planning, but still many are in marketing planning, sales kickoffs this week and next week from what we hear. So definitely think about your company's objectives. Listen to what they're talking about in the sales kickoff. Understand your team leaders, you know, the VPs, the C-levels, whatever, all those people, what are they focused on? What are they trying to achieve in 2021 post, you know, whatever happened in 2020 and still COVID around, but with this new reality. And align to that with your customer programs. Hey, if our objective as a company is to increase onboarding, how can we as customer advocacy, customer marketing support that? Maybe we can ask customers to help with onboarding materials, right? If our objective as a company is to grow the amount on average, just so you know, upsell, cross-sell expansion is about 20% on average from a company's revenue. Maybe your company is doing 10%, they want to reach the 20. Maybe they're doing 20 and they want to reach the 30. I mean, if your company's objective is to grow those numbers, how can we as a team of customer marketers, advocacy, whatnot, aspire to support that? If you think in that manner of how you can align with company KPIs, and I'm sure Leslie will talk about that as well, but I mean, I think it will help you a lot with getting more buy-in for all your programs and aligning your planning with the company's planning and the company's goals. Always happy to take it offline and talk with people about how to do that. And we also have like a process where we support with just building your business case. So always happy to support that as well. With that, I think I've talked plenty. Like I said, our next webinars are every month. Next one is going to be about referral strategies and results. Just stay tuned on our emails, social, whatnot, Slack, and we'll promote those. And now I'm going to move the speaking stage to Leslie and Brittany. We'll have a poll jump up, so feel free to fill that in. 10 winners are going to get ebooks that are really cool. We think so, at least. And that's it. Thank you, and let's start. And I'm going to stop sharing and stop talking.
Fantastic. I'm getting my screen up.
We'll get rolling here. I love what you talked about, though, Gal, the fact that you talked about things that literally are on our radar every day, as not only as we're executing the program that we've put in place, but as we're evolving it. Because in my opinion, having a organization that you structure at the beginning of when you start that journey doesn't mean that's the way that organization needs to look as you go through your growth and your expansion. And especially as you start to realize results and communicate those results, you've got to be able to evolve and accommodate to, you know, those objectives of the business, et cetera. So I love that you just touched upon that. So I just saw a poll pop up, so I'm going to go ahead and close that poll if that's okay. I hope I'm not already on the bad list.
You don't have to fill it, yeah.
So, and I apologize, I was on mute at first because of course I'm in Texas and at noon on Wednesdays, they do the tornado siren drill. So I'm glad that no one just heard the tornado siren drill that went off. So, but we really appreciate being able to be here and share our experience with, you know, building an organization really from the ground up. And then some of the things that the challenges we've overcome, as well as some of the learnings that we've taken away from this, and some of the things that we're most proud of in what we've accomplished in our 2 years at Genesys. So just a teeny bit about Genesys, in case anyone doesn't know who we are a customer experience SaaS company. We've been around for a while. So we actually just celebrated our 30th anniversary. And we're really proud of the fact that we are pretty pervasive among some of the world's biggest brands. If you look at the Brand Z brand list, we're in over 60% of those big brands globally, and really on the forefront of helping them provide better experiences for their customers and whatever means their customers want to interact with them. We're 5,500 employees globally and growing. And I know Brittany's got a cool video. We did one of our first commercials recently, and she wanted to play that, which I think explains well to the audience what Genesys does. So.
Yeah, this was our holiday spot. So thanks for allowing us to go back about a month.
Good morning. How can I help? I need help connecting with my students.
Behind every last minute date.
Okay, that works.
And holiday surprise. Thank you. A customer service rep is working on scene, making it happen. And at Genesys, we are proud to help them help you every day.
All right.
Short and sweet, but it does help to explain it. If you want to hop to the next one. So yeah, so when we looked at doing this, we are the two of the big things that I focus on are efficiency and then the impact for what you can get with having efficiencies in place. So that in mind, when we structured this team, which we'll go to the next slide to look at the structure, we always keep that in mind. So when you look at this structure, as you mentioned, Gal, there are titles in here that are not customary titles to what you see in a customer marketing organization, but there's a purpose behind why they're here. So you look at, and I'll start kind of in the middle here, you look at customer marketing manager. Angela Santa Rosa on our team is responsible for generating all of our published content, so case studies, videos, blogs, all that stuff. That kind of falls more in the more traditional advocacy or customer marketing area. But outside of that, that's where this team starts to get the nuances that we're here today to talk about. So we have doubled down on these roles called customer engagement directors. And there's a purpose behind that we'll dig into in a little bit, but we have them located within geographies. And so we have Johanna Rogers is our Director of Customer Engagement for the West. And then we have Laura Booth is our Engagement Director for EMEA. Julieta Conconi manages the US East as well as LATAM. And then Brittany is our engagement director for the Central. And then what we've done is we've found areas where we can also expand upon strengths within the team and say, okay, for example, Johanna came with a very strong background on executing advisory board meetings. So she's responsible for the development of all of our executive advisory boards, CABs, whatever you want to call them. It's a different acronym for a different day, it feels like. But also what we have within that is we have folks like on Johanna's team, we have Tara Peterson, who's responsible for all of our go live celebrations. We really like to take the chance to celebrate and acknowledge what customers go through from the purchase implementation process to that go live. There's a lot of heavy lifting involved there, especially in a SaaS world. And so we really like to acknowledge the customers for their achievements. We also are reforming and rebranding our user groups, having them led by users. So we're really excited about that. That falls under Johanna. And then we also have something that we're really proud of, our Genesys Customer Advocacy Program that we call GCAP. And that is the platform where we have over 5,000 customers, individuals that come on the platform and they network with one another. They learn from each other, they respond to challenges, they can earn prizes by earning points, etc. So that's an area that we feel like we have a lot of give that we can give back to the business, but also give back to the customers. So, and then I'll let Brittany dive into her team.
Sure. So for myself, I'm a customer engagement director, as Leslie mentioned, covering US Central. That means I have about 30 to 35 strategic accounts where I'm an extension of the account team. I sit on sales calls and very involved with what's going on with them. Leslie's going to go into more detail about that engagement director role on the next slide. I also, that AR stands for Analyst Relations. I work closely with our analyst team, and we'll also talk about that on the next slide. On my team, I have a fantastic team. I have Lisa, she's a reference program manager. She oversees our entire reference program globally. And any of you who are in the SaaS industry know how important references are to closing deals. So she fields all references globally and makes sure that we get those fulfilled, and is also working on providing feedback into the organization on where we have maybe some weaknesses and need to build up more references. Supporting her is Michael. He's over in the UK. We were lucky to add him this year. Not only does he give us a broader reach in terms of developing references, but it just helps us serve other time zones in a more efficient manner. So I'm hoping to add to that team. And then I have a customer engagement manager page on my team. She covers Canada and public sector, as well as our review program. So collecting peer reviews on places like G2 Crowd, Trust Radius, and Peer Insights. Yeah.
And then, so one of the things that I think when Brittany and I sat down to put this together, Gal, we wanted to make sure that we were keeping in mind the folks that were listening. And one of the things that we really wanted to be able to share were things that we learned along this journey, right? They were things that perhaps we may have known throughout our experience doing, customer marketing or references, but they became a little bit more toward the forefront, especially as we were building this team out. So we thought it would be helpful for everyone to be able to share these. So the first thing that we put a huge importance on is the experience of, making sure we're very tightly aligned with not just sales, but also customer success. I always say that I think of the story that builds what the customer story is I think of it as a layer cake visually. I'm a visual learner. So at the base layer is the perspective of the customer story that the AE can tell you. Then the next layer would be what the CSM can tell you. And then we've got layers like if the business consultant's involved, the strategic business consultant, they add another layer. Professional services, if they were involved, they add another layer, and it creates this really beautiful story, right? That you can really understand the full picture of the story instead of just through the lens of perhaps just the AE. So we have a lot of support from sales as well as from customer success. We had that support coming in at the beginning. We actually, when we first came on board, part of my agreement was we were going to roll into sales, which was at first everyone kind of went, wait, you want a what? But there was a reason behind it, because I wanted to make sure that we were able to establish that credibility with the sales field up front. But then also have the right stakeholders that we could drive to. One of the challenges we had previously in Brittany and I's previous organization was the stakeholders, oftentimes it became kind of cloudy, and we needed to ensure that our stakeholders were literally the customer and sales, period. And that drove everything. And my team, I feel like I say this a lot, and they're probably rolling their eyes right now, but I always say the only reason why we're here is because sales sells. And the minute we lose sight of that, we might as well polish off our resumes. So we had to be tightly aligned with them. And then I look at the engagement director role. That was another one that when I came on board, I said, okay, this is not just me. This has to be a team. And here's why. I have to have engagement directors. I see engagement directors, I call it the secret sauce. They, as Brittany mentioned, they are the single point of contact to so many of the most strategic customers within their region. And they don't just go to the AE or the account teams. The goal, the ultimate goal with the engagement directors is to get direct contact and establish a very reputable relationship directly with that customer, to where when we meet a customer in a pinch, and even the best planning you could put together, you're still in this world going to run into the fire drills. But when we need a customer in a pinch, we can literally pick up our phone and text the customer and lock them in. That creates efficiency that has proven to really produce some amazing results. And we started out with, when I came over, I was acting as an engagement director, Brittany was, Johanna was, and we've been able to prove that this model works so well that we have beefed up that engagement director organization, as you saw in the previous slide, and really been able to produce some pretty amazing things through that. So, and then I'll let Brittany talking about.
I think before actually Brittany talks, just because I've seen also questions. I mean, just a quick question. Setting up this organization before you continue with the programs, I mean, you're a VP. It's not a common title in our industry to have a VP of customer, engagement, advocacy, marketing. You're also talking about these roles and basically rolling up to sales. How was that process? So if people on this webinar are thinking, okay, who do I need to talk to get this structured? Or what is my key, my key sentences, my key pitch to actually make sure that somebody up there understands why we should have the Genesys framework? What is your tip for them?
So we came about it, I got pulled in through a situation where there was a QBR going on, and it was identified that they were unable, the sales teams were unable to get the most strategic references to close some of the biggest deals that were existing for that fiscal year. And in full disclosure, my husband was a sales leader here at Genesys, and he was sitting in the room and raised his hand and said, hey, I know someone who could help you there. So what that did was it gave me an in with several of the key executives within Genesys, most notably with the president of the company. I had a few calls with him, explained, hey, this is what we do. And literally the entire time he was responding going, we need that. Yes, we need that. So what I did is I did something that I felt a little unnatural for me at the time, but the more I do this, the more it becomes comfortable, is I decided, okay, I'm going to approach this the way perhaps my husband would. I'm going to get a little more aggressive here, and I'm going to ask and demand what we need to pull this off. I don't want to bring over, Brittany and Johanna, who had amazing careers at a company that's been around for a long time and is not going anywhere, right, at Oracle. I don't want to bring them over and not be able to produce what we know we can do. So I put together an offer of, okay, here's what it's going to take to pull this off. And this is where I give Genesys a ton of credit. They literally looked at it and said, all right, let's do it. And they trusted me. They trusted that this would work. And so that was really that I got very bullish. So if I could give any advice to anyone, it's if you know how to do what you've been tasked with doing or what they want, identify how that's going to affect the business in a positive way, and don't be shy to ask for it. That's what I think when I look at advocacy as a whole, customer marketing, customer references, oftentimes I feel like it's this, not an afterthought, but it is not getting the exposure it needs to within the business. You're absolutely right, Gal, when you were mentioning at the beginning that some of the biggest influencers, if not the biggest influencers, especially in today's buying market, is the voice of validity from a customer. That is spot on, and that just needs to be bubbled up to the top to where everyone understands there is value in not only finding these voices and telling them in a way that's meaningful to those individuals, but also putting them in the business and in the sales cycles at the right time. The worst thing we could do is be callous with our advocates' time, right? So that would be my feedback on how to do that. I mean, I do feel like I was kind of in a rainbow unicorn world there for a little while. So I jumped on the unicorn and rode the rainbow. And so here we are today.
Right. Okay. So Brittany, go ahead.
Sure. So the third thing is, don't try to boil the ocean. We knew from the beginning we really had to focus on what was going to make the most impact, as Leslie said. And our two key stakeholders that she mentioned are sales and our customers. So we really knew we needed to zero in on programs that made the biggest impact for sales and the biggest impact for our customers. So obviously reference fulfillment was at the top of that list. We need to get sales selling, like Leslie said. If we can't support them, then what are we doing here? So it was really important to have a strong reference fulfillment program and make sure that we're delivering on what they need, because that was one of the big reasons that we came over. The second is I'll group user groups, executive roundtables, and our advocacy program into one. We wanted to make sure that we allow customers an opportunity to network with their peers, to get to know the business better, to have a voice back into product and know that they could impact things like roadmap. And that all comes through these three groups, whether it's, you know, more of a technical perspective and user group, you've got the executive that are looking from a strategic long-term perspective, or you have those who are just using it on a daily basis and want to be involved in the advocacy program. We feel like these are three great ways to get customers involved, and it makes them more sticky over time. And the last program, and this is by no means an exhaustive list, that we focus on is peer reviews. I was just looking at some Forrester research this week, and it said 90% of tech buyers do their research online, and then they come find you when they're ready to buy. So we can't ignore peer review sites. We have to make sure that we're maintaining a good presence and score on those review sites. So it was really a key area for us as well. And then being a liaison for other marketing functions, I'm sure there's people on this call that can relate. We were in a situation where we had a team alias and requests would just come in from anywhere across the organization, other groups in marketing. Hey, we need a customer for XYZ. And it was all hands on deck and we're scrambling. And half the time people just said, we need a customer for this with no context. What do you need an executive? Is this a business level decision or discussion? Is it a technical discussion? So we put people in places to kind of be the point of contact for that. So for me, I am the point of contact for our Analyst Relations team. So if they need a customer, I sit down with them on a monthly basis, and I have, you know, foresight into where they're going to need customers for the rest of the year. And I can ask the tough questions and kind of vet what they're looking for, and then bring that back to my team and say, okay, here's what we need. And then kind of a little tidbit for anybody who is going to do this, it's really helpful if that person can almost write the ask in an email template to be sent out and ask customers. That really helps the rest of the team. And I try to do that. And then Leslie, you want to cover the last two bullets?
Yeah, so, and Gal, you did touch upon what I think this is going to be a new key phrase, the life cycle marketing. And I really see advocacy programs and customer marketing programs being a major portion of that life cycle marketing, because we can offer things like Brittany just talked about, the user groups, the roundtable discussions, you know, any of the advisory board things. Typically that will fall under a customer marketing role. And when you look at, you know, when you put yourself in the shoes of a customer, from the very beginning of, you know, digging in with a new partnership with a vendor, all the way through to a maturity model, we have to be mindful of making sure that they're not feeling as though they're being left out in any part of that journey. So we're being very purposeful in what we're doubling down on, especially as we're just wrapping up our fiscal year 2021 and starting fiscal year 2022 in February. And so we're really being mindful of that journey for the customer. We don't want to have the customers feeling as though, okay, I just hit the black hole here, you know? So, and then the other thing I would say that, and this is, I think, universal to any customer marketing organization, is we really have to be the sword and shield for our customers, because they are being generous with their time, generous with their voice. And the minute we take that with any sort of callous, then we've worn out our welcome mat with that customer really quick. So we really try and make sure that when we put together, you know, how we want to leverage a customer and their voice, we sit down with them and say, okay, let's talk about cadence. Let's talk about what activities or events or, you know, whatever is of interest to you. And we make sure we put together a program and, you know, put some structure to it as far as a cadence goes, to where we don't wear out that welcome mat, but we also, you know, are able to make them be the rock stars that they are. We just simply give them the platform to do that. So. And then, go ahead.
Yeah, let's pause maybe for a few questions. So, so first thing, basically, when you write the engagement managers, just so everybody's clear, I think, I mean, you're not covering all the Genesys customers, right? You have thousands and thousands of customers, but you're focusing on certain accounts, assumably strategic accounts, right? How do you define which accounts are going to be engaged so tightly versus the ones who are maybe less so engaged?
Is that for me? Yeah, sure. So absolutely. So we took a look at each territory, and we actually sat down, Leslie did this with the sales executives that were responsible for those territories and said, hey, which accounts are strategic to you and important to you, and who do we need to make sure has a great experience with Genesys? So that was one piece of input. The other piece of input that we look at is just general revenue and bookings that customer, brings into the organization. But the third thing is really key. It's what is their story? Do they have a relatable story that other customers are going to want to hear about? Are they open to working with someone like us, or do we just get a brick wall that says no, never? We can never participate in any advocacy stuff. And I think it's the combination of those three things is how we determine our list. It's not always what you would think. You'd think we'd take our top brands and only enterprise companies would be on the list. That's not always true. If they have a great story, we evaluate them and consider adding them to our list.
And I would also say, Gal, that list is never stagnant. It's so funny. To me, the question I whenever I get it, I go, oh God, I don't want to do this. When people ask me, well, what is your engagement director's account list? Can I see it? Well, okay, fine. But what I show you today might not be the same in a little while, because there's nuances to the way a customer wants to engage. So we have to make sure that we have the flexibility in those lists, those account assignments, to where if there's a customer who perhaps has said, you know what, I kind of want to go on the back burner for a little while. We're doing a massive integration. Okay, we are going to respect you completely for that. And then while that customer is off, we might pull on someone new onto the list and figure out, okay, can we leverage their voice in a different way? So those lists are, they're constantly evolving.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I would also add that having Angela on our team managing case studies and videos, she is going for breadth, right? And so she may find and come across a customer story, whether it's through a case study or perhaps our awards program. We get a nomination through our awards program. A customer may bubble up to the top, and we may pluck them out and say, okay, this needs to be a strategic account. So we constantly have feelers out there to continue to add and build our list.
Okay. So one question here from Jonathan, and I think I'll try to kind of correct it as we go. But I mean, his question is, when do you decide, or when do you reach out directly to the customer, right? On one hand, but when otherwise, would you actually do it through a system and through a process and whatnot? And I guess he's relating whether it is to reference requests or whatnot. When would that really flow through the system and through sales? And when would that happen directly, either by the engagement manager or, God forbid, by the salespeople themselves bypassing you?
Yes. So I'll take reference requests specifically. In our program, we have what we call peer-to-peer requests, and we allow AEs to go to AEs and say, hey, I'd like to request your customer. And that's pretty much an automated system, and we let that, go on its own. But if they're asking for a strategic account, we have worked with our AEs and CSMs on those accounts. They know if it's a reference request, it needs to come through us, and we will vet those. We will make sure there's a reference brief filled out, so we have some information on the conversation that they're looking to have, and then we will reach out directly to the customer. Our goal as engagement directors is always to make sure that we don't have to go through anyone else to broker the relationship with the customer. Now, first, of course, we have to earn the trust of the AEs and the CSNs and get to know the customer. But once we get to that point, we just go directly to the customer. And we typically have an engagement plan laid out to where they tell us, okay, I'm comfortable with reference calls once a month or once a quarter. And so we make sure that we're respecting that boundary as well.
Okay. Question from Shelley. Interesting. So what if the team is smaller? You have 11 people on your team. That is a relatively large team from, in this space. So what if the team is smaller with tens of thousands of customers and getting asked for reference calls, customer speakers, webinars, case studies, analyst study participants, etc.? How do you focus your efforts And how or when would you say no?
Okay, so there's a concept. Your favorite children. So I would say really make sure that you invest in those customers that do have extreme generosity and some flexibility with their calendar. That's what I would dig into those relationships hardcore. But in the meantime, I think that making sure that if you are a small team, say my team, oh my God, I don't want to verbalize this, but say tomorrow it's cut in half, I would then say, okay, engagement directors, let's make sure that we are keeping the lights on with our biggest and most strategic accounts that we have direct relationships with. But then as far as reaching beyond that, because we certainly don't want to just have the same ones that we go to all the time, reaching outside of that, let's listen to the business. Let's look at what the needs are from a reference fulfillment perspective. And let's make sure we drive to getting the relationships with those customers that are going to address those needs. Whether that need is coming from a reference fulfillment, or maybe there is a big initiative to, broaden the digital, footprint of a customer. That's where you would have to double down then.
Yeah. You can also get creative when you have a small team and kind of invite people to be a part of your team. So the way that we do that, for example, we don't have someone in the APAC region, and we really do, but we have very strong field marketing in the APAC region. So we offer them incentives to help us find customers in their area. We do the same with our sales teams and CSM teams. We're currently running incentive programs. We have budget set aside for them to bring referencing customers for them to source customers to leave reviews. And if you can kind of make the rest of the organization your de facto extension of your team, that's a creative way to get around not having as many resources.
Right. I'd add only one thing to Shelly. So, I mean, first of all, small teams many times are stretched out to, big teams are stretched out as well, but I mean, stretched out to do everything, and it's difficult to choose what. Going back to what I said early on, if you could align it to the company KPI, so if you could agree that, for example, reference calls comes first because they influence sales, okay? Let's agree on that. Then second priority, agree with your managers, right? I mean, then second priority might be, you mentioned here, analysts. So maybe that's second priority because that's, branding, whatnot. Then, I don't know, speakers. So, I mean, create like some kind of prioritization that is agreed, not your own prioritization, but agreed on with your managers, with sales, with whatnot, so everybody understands. And also keep a tab. I mean, I loved what Leslie said. It's earlier on, be more aggressive. It's a general advice to everybody in customer marketing, mostly to women. Okay, no intention, but I mean, you need to keep a tab. And not only be the horn of your customers, but be the horn of yourself. You're probably doing an amazing job. Nobody probably understands how much you're doing on a team of one or two. So it's not only about aligning on the objectives, it's also about keeping a tab and every month showing that to your managers, showing that to sales, showing how much you influence and telling them, oh, by the way, these are 10 things or 20 things I didn't do because I didn't have time. Can you now add another person to my team? Can you add a tool that will help me automate whatever? But blow your horn as well.
I love that you just said that. I'm going to go off script for a second because that was one thing that, and I don't want to get into a gender situation here, but it was not natural for me to be bullish with my ask, but I decided, okay, this is my chance. I am going to dive in the way that I've always wanted to dive into something like this. And I am going to be bullish. The worst I'm going to hear is, no, we can't do that. And then guess what? I've got an amazing career at Oracle. I'm fine. I can stay there. I would have been just fine there. But this was that moment where I just went, okay. And I literally had this conversation in my own head going, Leslie, it's now or never, girl. You got to dig in and do it. And I'm telling you, once you do that once, it's so much easier to do it again and again. And you can do that with still having that, without being, seen as too bullish. And I'm not going to use the word that typically gets thrown around, but you can be assertive without being seen in a negative light. You just also, though, have to have the results behind it and the confidence in those results to back it up. That's the one thing I would say.
Yeah, and before we move on, I see a comment on the gender-based comment about women. So just to clarify the opposite, my recommendation, and I think again, Leslie kind of emphasized it as well, is that there are many women in customer marketing. They're doing an amazing job, many times a better job than men. Okay, if so, I did a gender comment on men right now. So just the only recommendation is be confident about your work and be, powerful on how you emphasize what you've achieved and what tools you need to be even more successful. That's all. Nothing at all in any way undermine women.
I think you're saying, like, don't negotiate with yourself first before you go in the room to negotiate. Like,
right.
Just go.
I love that. Well said.
Moving on.
All right. Challenges we faced.
Oh boy. Okay. So, this slide kind of always makes me go, because it's not that there wasn't some amazing work being done at Genesys before we came on board. There was extremely talented folks within customer marketing. The biggest problem is that there was not that executive buy-in to say, yep, this is the team you need to go through to get this done. And so what had happened is there were all these different groups within Genesys that had someone in charge of advocacy or someone who was pulling together the references. And so what was happening is these customers were getting hit by, lasers coming from 9 different organizations into one customer with the same ask oftentimes. So we went and said, look, if you're going to buy into this, you have to go through this team to get these asks made. And I would say, and I still say it to this day, because I still present on what this team does internally, don't put me in a situation where we're bumping into someone else in the lobby of a customer making the same ask. That is not a good situation. So we mitigated a lot of those siloed programs or reference specialists, if you will. And then as we started to have proof points, that's when we really saw some of the traction happen. So, and we were just very bold and loud. I'll own it, Brittany. I was very loud with our successes. So that way we could make sure that we could mitigate all those little nuanced little reference programs popping up throughout the business. Mm-hmm. Brittany, you want to talk about the inefficiency? This is your world.
So I have to give so much kudos to Lisa on my team. Like, she was a one-woman show. She was managing all reference requests globally with not a whole lot of air cover. For example, we had the ability to send company-wide emails saying, hey, does anyone have a reference for this? And it would just cause all kinds of headaches for people. And she was just, keeping everything afloat, trying to manage, the peer-to-peer automated process, but also like the managed request. And so we had to come in and eliminate some of the inefficiencies for her. Like we developed a reference brief so people could be more informed about the asks that they're making. We got rid of those sore emails, thank goodness, and just had more proactive education of the AEs and the CSMs on how to leverage reference selling. And I don't know if she's on, but I think she's probably nodding her head. She's in a much better place today than we were a year and a half ago. So we were excited to remove some of those roadblocks for her, but she's still very much doing amazing things. But we've luckily been able to add to the team because of her work.
The other key challenge is we didn't have a ton of executive awareness as to what we did. That has been, in my role, I see that as one of my #1 things that I can do is go build relationships with each of our executives and ensure that they understand what this team is and what we can deliver. So that, I think, is one of the keys there. And that was something that hadn't happened previously before we came on board. So that was.
Could you elaborate a bit how you do that? Because I think that's everybody's challenge. I mean, executive awareness is probably one of the biggest hinders in this domain.
Oh, I can be very I'm usually one of the least quiet people on an internal call. So I make sure that anytime I hear of anything that could involve a customer, I chime in and I will speak up and say, hey, we can help with that. We'll take that. Let us make that ask. This is what we do. We're probably the best people to make that ask, because not only are we very good and very rehearsed at how we position the ask, but we also see all the other asks that might be coming to that customer too. So the minute you point out things like that to the executives, every single one of them gets it. So and then I think being able also to highlight our successes. I talk all the time about our results and what we've done and what we can accomplish. And that has really made a difference in, you know, how we're utilized. Now we get messages from the top executives in our company, you know, hey, I need, you know, a speaker for this, or I need someone for that. And they come to us. They don't go to other people anymore. So.
I would also add that Leslie's enabled us, like where she may have regular cadence with some of the top sales leaders, engagement directors will have regular cadence with the sales leaders in our regions. So it's from the top down, we're making sure that there are open lines of communication and they're aware of what we're doing and how we can support them.
So the way you're saying that whether customer, again, engagement, advocacy, marketing, reports to sales or not, it's very important that they are involved in sales meetings and sales agendas so they can raise their hand and say, let us help.
Yes, 110%.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, no measured ROI. We were not doing a great job of tracking the value that what we were doing was providing back to the organization. So we weren't necessarily tracking closed opportunities when they were tied to reference calls, how people were using our assets, even down to things like an RFP. I don't know that we were doing a lot of tracking other than views on our website of case studies and videos, things like that. So we have a much more mature model on how we're measuring ROI now.
And you're going to touch that soon because there's also a question on that from Nathaniel. So yeah.
Okay, yeah, we'll touch on that.
And I think the other challenge we had was the job roles weren't super clearly defined. I think that there's not only benefit from an efficiency perspective and an economy perspective with having clearly defined job roles, but there's also a real sense of ownership that people on the team can have when they understand and they know, look, I own this. This is my thing, you know, that I felt like overcoming that challenge was another one of our big accomplishments, but it was definitely a challenge coming on board here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then the vetting of task, it felt like customer marketing at the time was just kind of a dumping ground for any request that had the word customer in it. It says, oh, it's customer, it needs to go to customer marketing. And there was no strategy behind it. There was no filter. So if someone asked earlier, what do you say no to? There are requests that come in that we say, you know, this doesn't really align to what, you know, sales is going for. We love our media and PR team. We support them all the time, but sometimes there's just a request where they need a customer, but that customer is also doing a very important reference call for us. And we're going to say no because they need to do the reference call, you know, because it's tied to revenue. So we have to make some tough decisions like that sometimes with the customer's time. And it goes into like how we're vetting tasks from the beginning all the way through with the customer.
And then the last challenge that we encountered was, even though we are a North American based company, we do have a very strong global footprint, and that global footprint has honestly grown pretty tremendously just in the 2 years that Brittany and I have been here. But the coverage on that global footprint, probably because of, you know, again, the real delineation of the job roles, but also the size of the team, that was a struggle because that's a huge geography to try and cover with a small team. And I always say I'm very empathetic to, you know, 2-person, 3-person customer marketing or advocacy teams, because especially if you have a global customer base, that is a massive challenge. And it's something that I don't know that anyone has necessarily cracked the secret to code to. But I think that our approach to this, which we'll dive into in one of the next slides, was really probably the best strategy we could have applied at the time with that.
All right, let's talk about some results.
Yeah, so job roles. So, you know, we came on board and we were doing this customer engagement thing that no one really quite understood what it was. So, and then we merged with what was our original customer marketing team. And the other thing I'm going to give Genesys credit for, and the leaders that I rolled up to, is they didn't give me any limitations on what we could do with the team. So literally when we merged, I said, okay, let's find everyone's strengths and what they enjoy doing, you know, and talking to the individuals and saying, okay, you're doing X, Y, and Z, but is that enjoyable? Do you think we're getting a lot of benefit of that? We took some tasks off their page. We actually took a match and struck it and burned a bunch of things that were going on and said, okay, let's focus on this because you enjoy that, right? You get a lot of personal benefit out of that as far as your confidence and your career growth, right? And so we did that with literally the entire team and then put some really clear definition around what their roles were. And then also how you interact even with people within this own team, right? Because yeah, 11 people on a team, sometimes they're, you know, if there aren't clearly defined job roles, things can get kind of muddied or confused. So we're always very, very clear with, okay, so-and-so does this, so-and-so does that. We're going to make sure that let them do what they're good at and you get to focus on what you're good at, right? Brittany, you want to go into the bookings and the growth?
Sure. So we're really proud of this number. Nearly 60% of our total bookings this year have been influenced by advocacy activities. And I know there was a question around how do we track that? So we actually look at every opportunity in Salesforce as our CRM, and each opportunity has an opportunity ID. And we will associate that with any reference calls or any type of that activity that happens within that opportunity before it closes. So for example, we have these reference forums that we do. And it's instead of a one-to-one reference call, it's one-to-many. So we'll have people dial in just like this and listen to a customer talk about their experience with Genesys, and they'll answer a live Q&A. They've been really well received. Well, we will take that attendee list and map it back to all of the open opportunities with those accounts that were represented, and we will track when those opportunities are closed won, and we'll look at those total bookings at the end of the year. So Lisa, again, my one-woman show, she has found a way to track all that, and it's been a really impactful way to show the organization the value that our team provides. As far as growth of our
Before you go on, regarding that one-to-many reference call, because I love that notion, when do you decide if to do a one-to-one and when do you decide to do a one-to-many? How do you make that kind of?
Awesome question. We look at who's being requested the most as a reference. If they're getting a request once a week and they're like, guys, I can't handle this volume, perfect. Let's do a reference form, and then we don't have to talk to you for 4 months, 6 months. You know, we'll just send the recording out to people. We'll send people to watch that. And our customers love it. Prospects really enjoy it because, you know, someone else on the call could ask a question that they didn't think to ask, but it was a really good question. And then sales loves it as well because they get to listen in on the call and understand, you know, what the customers and prospects are interested in learning about our technology.
Amazing, love it.
Yeah. As far as our advocacy program, we typically see 15% year-over-year growth, which is great. I will say 2020 was a weird year for us, as it was for everyone. We see a lot of growth and signups and enrollment in our advocacy program at our live events. And, you know, obviously we didn't have that this year. So we're working on getting creative in 2021 for how we recruit there. And then Leslie, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, so as far as the executive buy-in goes, and we touched upon this in the last slide a little bit, but it has really been tremendous. And this is where I also have to acknowledge the Genesys executives that we work with, because they are completely behind this team now, to where, you know, we literally have EVPs that'll reach out to us and say, all right, here's what I need. You know, and instead of, they have entire large organizations that they could have in the past gone to and probably did. But now they're coming to us because they trust what we do. They know that we're going to be effective, and they know we're going to be efficient with our time, with their ask. So that's the one thing I'm really proud of, is the buy-in that we've received from our executives, and that's all the way to the top. So as far as tips, and we touched upon this before, part of my role is really promoting all the amazing work that this team does. This is by no means anything that I, Leslie, do to necessarily drive these results. This is a team accomplishment. And anytime we get the chance, anytime I get the chance to promote what the team is doing, I want to be loud and proud with that. So if I could give any tips for anyone who's either leading a team or starting a team, really promote those successes. It's not only a very positive conversation to have, but oftentimes it'll lead to follow-up conversations, which is always goodness.
Mm-hmm. And what goes hand in hand with that is educating everyone. We're constantly, as Leslie's mentioned several times, we're constantly educating other groups about what we do, not only in marketing, but in all aspects of the organization, even to customer care. We sit down with the leaders there and talk on a regular basis about what's going on from a care perspective and what they're seeing as part of the customer life cycle. There's people on our team that are responsible. They sit on, we have monthly onboarding for any new hires to Genesys, and they have to go through about 4 days of training. We have our own dedicated session to our team and our programs. And so there's folks on our team that give that presentation once a month, sometimes more often. But we always make sure that we're getting the word out about what our team does and how they can leverage us. And then this one goes without saying, tying advocacy activity to bookings influence. So we found out a way to do that. There are some creative ways out there that I've seen to do it, but I think it's key is to be able to articulate how you're influencing the bottom line.
And then the second to last bullet here, the in-region support. This is, if you have the ability, if you can afford to do this, it will reap benefits. A good example of this is we have Julieta, who manages LATAM. I was trying to limp along before we were able to get Julieta here, engaging with LATAM, rather oblivious and naive to a lot of the nuances within the different countries within LATAM. And she came in, coming from Argentina, and knew right away, okay, you're not going to get this group to talk to this group. These folks are going to want to communicate in this way. This is the type of references they're going to want. Having that knowledge in region, if you can do it, it pays off big time. Like Julieta took LATAM from very little production of publicly used reference assets to literally one of the fastest growing regions that I have when I look at the overall portfolio. So amazing. Same with Lara in EMEA. What Lara has done in EMEA, oh my God. Normally that would take a team of 3 to 4 engagement directors to do. She continually blows my mind with what she accomplishes. And that's because she is in region. She understands, she's able to develop those relationships right
Definitely,
there.
Yeah. We have some questions, so maybe quickly just create feedback loops and then we'll ask the questions because we're coming to the end of the hour.
As far as feedback loops, I love to hear, what are we doing right, but also where could we sharpen our pencil a bit? You know, I never want to say, yeah, we've got our thing, we're fine, you know, we're just going to cruise along. No, we constantly have to be looking for areas for improvement and give feedback, not only receive it, but also give it to other groups. So, you know, hey, you did a really great job of giving us the parameters for these references you needed for this event early on. That was incredibly helpful, and look at the results we got.
Cool. Okay, so we'll take a few questions. First of all, before we head off and answer those questions, thank you so much, Leslie and Brittany, for sharing your experience, talking to us. I think that most of the people on this call gained a lot of knowledge, and they can probably connect with you on LinkedIn and ask more questions, of course. And we'll, if we don't get to answer all the questions, we'll email people the responses later on as well. And thank you all the people who participated for joining. And now we'll take a few more minutes, maybe even we go over just to answer questions and hopefully answer everybody. Right, this is the last slide. I'm not wrong, right?
Correct.
Yeah, okay, so Heather is asking, how do you measure ROI and the impact of non-reference call activities?
That's a great question. So we're actually looking at that right now on how to best track that. It's a more difficult thing to do. In some cases, we can track it because we know the use of those assets were directly tied to an opportunity, whether it's through an RFP or otherwise. But Leslie, I know you and Angela have been exploring this, like how are we going to track views of case studies and things like that to actually tie that back into revenue?
Yeah, I think that's one of those bouncing balls that I feel like I'm continually chasing to find the answer to. We are going to be kind of dabbling in how we measure, visibility, things like that. But I don't know that I've even heard of any group having a really clearly defined way of measuring that, to be honest. And if someone knows, please direct message me on LinkedIn because I would love to hear it.
But I would say in general, if there's a way to tie an opportunity ID to whatever activity it is, do that. And that's the best way we found to tie it back to impact.
Absolutely.
Right. And I would add to that, at least from Advocate in our experience, then we tie that through basically the opportunity and the link. So marketing automation has a way to track, like think about marketing automation with leads where they have these UTMs and they track people who click the link and if they join the webinar or whatnot, and they know to tell you that whole breadcrumb, that whole trail. You could basically with automation do the same thing for content pieces. It needs a bit of sophistication, but not that much. So I mean that there are ways to solve that as well. The other question we have is from Tyler about how do you manage the approval process for customers providing references? This is a huge hurdle for us wherever we have asked for customers like case studies, webinars, references, whatnot.
You want to take that one?
Yeah, so I'll take one version of that. So the way that we manage approvals or handle approvals with managed accounts, we meet up front with the customer. We'll have an in-person meeting, or we used to. We'll have a virtual meeting now and talk to them about what are your goals? Because typically they have some career goals that they want to meet. They want a platform to tell their story, and we understand like what are you looking to do? And when we have that up front, it's an icebreaker for when we come back with opportunities that they've expressed interest in already. So I'll sit down with a customer. I have a large appliance manufacturer that's one of my customers, and I before COVID flew out to Tennessee, met with them and said, hey, what is it that you're interested in doing? And we came up with the list. And now when I come back to that customer and say, hey, I know you're interested in this. Is this something that you'd like to participate in? It's a much quicker yes than trying to beat down doors and find the right person. But I would say establishing that customer relationship first, and also setting the ground rules for what it is what it is that they're interested in and what they're not interested in doing.
If I could add on that, one of the things that we're very mindful of is if we have a customer's time for say an hour to do an interview or a video, we leverage that time as much as possible. So we will, if it's a video, we get the raw footage. We also transcribe every word in that hour that was recorded. And we'll go and get power quotes out of that transcription. Or we'll go and take that transcription and send it to the agency that we primarily use to write a lot of our case studies. We'll also go and take, we all know a customer video can't really be more than about 3 minutes at the very most. And so there's a lot of footage that hits the floor from those recordings. We then go and take a lot of those and group them maybe by a solution area and say, okay, let's give this to those product managers for that particular solution. And they can create a little montage video or a vignette based upon the comments that this particular customer said. And what my goal is to really create a library of a lot of that content to where they can do some self-service, if you will, for what they might want to use. So we try and multi-purpose as much as possible when we have a customer's time.
The other thing you'll run into often is even if you have a customer advocate that's willing to do something, they don't always know what their legal or comms team, is going to say after they do the activity. And I've unfortunately run into this situation where we went ahead and recorded a video and then didn't get approval to do it. So what we try to do is take that off the customer's plate. Say, hey, I know you're going to have to go through your comms and legal team to get approval for this. Go ahead and just introduce me. I work with these folks all the time, and let me work directly with them, and we'll get approvals before we even start down this path. And that's been a really effective strategy as well.
We have some more questions. We're kind of out of time. We'll take, I think, so even, I see a question here about, your advocacy program and other things like the benefits and whatnot and others. So we'll answer people, I guess we'll send those questions all later on and answer them. But maybe just one thing out of all these questions, what's the benefit? And that would be the last thing. So again, thank you both, and thank you everybody, because after this we're going to close the webinar. But I mean, what are the benefits basically that you provide your customers? I mean, what's in it for them?
Oh my gosh, Brittany, you've got a great story to tell.
Yeah, I love this question so much because I try to approach this from the customer's perspective. There's obviously so much benefit to Genesys, but really, truly, we're asking for their time. It's valuable. What are they getting out of it? And I would say typically it's a platform to tell their story. It's resources to track the value realization that they're getting out of the product and to be able to tell that back into their organization. And then it's just personal development. So whether they want to speak to the media, they want to speak to analysts, they want to be on a stage and present, it's that personal and professional development. I actually have a customer who was, I think, senior director level, and we were able to get him on stage at one of our conferences. And because we have an executive event there, I helped him get his CIO there as well. Well, the CIO saw him on stage speaking and was so blown away by the results that he'd achieved. He came off stage and they had a conversation about what was next in his career. And it was not long before he was no longer a senior director and was managing a much larger group. But there is a lot of professional development that happens when they engage with a program like ours. The other benefit that's huge that really I don't think gets enough credit is the networking. I have so many executives saying, I just want to talk to someone else who loses sleep over the same things as me at night. I want to understand what this organization outside of my industry, how they're doing things differently with the same technology. And so that's hugely important. Just like we're all here today, I would love to have, a glass of wine and talk shop with everyone here and understand, how are you doing it? What could we be doing better and differently? Our customers are no different.
We'll consider wine for our next session. Okay. So with that, thank you so much for everybody and more than 30 people that are still with us. I really have to, thank you for all the tips. It was great to have you. We have this recorded. We'll answer other questions later on if we can by email. And again, thank you so much, everybody. It was great, and Happy New Year. Hope 2020 will be great.
Yes. That point too, Gal. What you're doing is making an impact to our world. So thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Bye.
Bye.